I know you work primarily in the SEL space, and as do we. So our work is also social emotional learning. But this particular research that we're doing to develop a glossary is to develop a glossary of life skills for India for Indian school children, particularly children in the public school system. Currently in 4 states of India, but it could perhaps be, spread extended to other states also. So keeping in mind, USA is a diverse country. India is an even more diverse country, and a far more and a country with a lot more, difficulties and prejudices, etc. So, in your mind, what comes to your mind when you think of the term life skills? What are the connotations of life skills for you?
Yeah, I think it boils down to what is it that people need to be able to navigate the ups and downs, the challenges of life, to be able to maneuver through strategically whatever you encounter in life. You can plan all you want. You can have your plans. You can go to school. You can get your education. And then life happens. And I think when life happens, you have to be equipped to be able to respond to it in a way that allows you to still be able to function and allows you to still be able to have the opportunity to accomplish, to have the opportunity to contribute, to have the opportunity to feel like when you look yourself in the mirror, that you've done your level best to incorporate into this schema of life, to be a part of society, to contribute to the collective. It's hard to do when you don't have a way to kind of process what happens in life. And so life skills just really gives you that opportunity. It gives you what you need to just be human, not just know things, but to actually be human. And to be human in somewhat of a successful way with other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you see they juxtapose life skills and SEL? Or do they at all?
I can't
are they
separate the two.
Yeah, are they synonymous? Yeah.
Yeah, I can't separate the two. And even when I would, I'm a former school counselor. When I was doing school counseling, we used to call it life skills. I used to do guidance lessons with students, and it was life skills, character development. I wouldn't call it character development now. But when I think about social emotional learning, and when I think about life skills, you cannot be socially well and competent or emotionally well and competent outside of life skills. I think those are I see them as synonymous. I mean, they are all one and the same.
Yeah. Okay. So, so you've actually answered the second question. In what ways do you think life skills play an important role in a child's growth and development? And you sort of mentioned it, that in order for children young people to contribute, accomplish, be human, etc. Is there anything else you want to add in terms of what way life skills contributes to young people's growth and development? You've already sort of responded to it, but is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is that part of this process of growth and development is coming to understand self and coming to understand who I am as an individual, what I bring to this fabric of life. What are the aspects of me that are unique to myself, and how does that create for myself a rich experience in this life? And now how does that create for other people around me an experience for them as well? So I think there's an appreciation of who you are as an individual outside of what society tells you that has to be a part of your growth and development. I mean, without that, we run the gamut of mental health challenges. We run the gamut of students who are not thriving. Like, you just have to have that inner sense of self, and that continues to be a part of the growth and development process that young people have.
Yeah, Yeah, very true. So, which other life skills, or what life skills you think are absolutely essential if you were to sort of rattle off, say, 10 life skills? It doesn't have to be 10, it could be even five. Which life skills do you think are really critical for young people?
There's so many. There's so
Yeah, I
many.
know, I
Um,
know.
so we have been, I'm going to pull off some of, we just wrote an article, it's set to be published in July,
Okay.
that really is around some of the focal constructs of social emotional learning. And I think some of those constructs really are what I would say life skills that are critical. So one I'm going to pull out is we've been talking a lot about identity. And I think that is absolutely critical.
Mm,
And when we talk about identity, we really talk about how does the young person learn how to reflect upon themselves, how to be clear about who they are as individuals, how to be clear about how society sees them, and how to make peace with those elements. Like how do I grapple with my race, my ethnicity, my class, and how do I ensure that I find the assets of what that contributes to who I
mm,
am as an
yeah,
individual.
yeah.
Um, I think without that, you're in a situation where you're bound to not succeed at the level that you can, because you're waiting for society to define yourself for you. So I
Yeah.
think identity is critical. It is also critical for this element of self-respect, when you recognize that you come with assets, that what you bring to the table, that what you came to this earth with is valuable. There's a level of self-respect that you cannot get from outside of yourself. And I think that element is critical, particularly when we think about countries, even like in the United States, where diversity is something that we are challenged with, where race is an issue, where ethnicity is an issue. If myself as a Black female does not recognize the assets that I bring as a Black female, and I wait for society to tell me, identity will not be a strength of mine at all. And I think it's the
Yeah.
same thing in India.
Yeah.
The other element that we've brought up that I've been thinking about these a lot. That's why I think these elements that we bring up in this article is so critical. I think agency is another piece. And the idea of agency is, how am I able to contribute to my own personal well-being and to the collective well-being? So when a young person sees life around them and they see something that isn't the way that it should be, how agentic, how powerful do they think they are to be able to change that? Do they feel like they have the opportunity to change the trajectory of their lives? Do they feel like they have the opportunity to contribute to a better humanity? I think without that, you get that sense of hopelessness. So agency really allows young people to feel like, despite what I'm looking at this moment, there is something within me, there is a power within me that can allow me to contribute to change happening for myself and to change happening for those around me. So I think that's also important. The
Yeah.
other life skill I would elevate is curiosity. I think
Mhm.
curiosity is critical.
Mhm.
It allows young people to consistently, critically self-analyze, to ask themselves, did I respond in this way? Did I respond in a way that I should have? Could I have done that better? It always allows them the opportunity to reflect and do different, or reflect and choose to do the same because it was exactly what I should have done,
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
also allows them to critically analyze context around them. It
Mm.
helps them to really choose to be investigators and questioners of what's happening around them instead of just consumers. And to realize that I am in the driver's seat. I can ask questions, and from those questions, I can get answers that allow me to choose differently or to contribute differently.
Yeah.
So I think curiosity is huge. And we tamp that down a lot with young people. We don't always create spaces where they can ask questions, where they can push back, where they can question adults, because it puts
True.
us in a place where we have to know more,
Yeah.
where we have to be vulnerable, and we have to be willing to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I would say that's another one. Maya, I can go forever with what's needed, but I'll do
maybe a couple more if you have.
okay. I'll do the other two that we have because I think those are so important. I think this sense of belonging is another piece. And with that, I'll say this idea of inclusivity. And I think it's the idea that I can either choose to go through life on my own and only experience a certain aspect of it, or I can be part of a collective and contribute to it and have this sense of connectedness and have this sense of trust where we can develop more. So this sense of belonging really helps individuals and young people to have a sense of self-worth because you're a part of something bigger than yourself. So I would say that belonging, which really fosters inclusivity and really starts to eat away at elements like classism and racism. And, it really begins to help us to see our collective humanity and how diversity is actually a strength and not a weakness.
Yeah.
And then the last piece I'll bring up is the collaborative problem solving. We've got a lot of problems in our society and in our respective countries, and young people have a lot of solutions and answers and ideas and suggestions. And I think if they can learn how to bring their minds with the minds of others, then they have the opportunity to recognize how much shift and how much change can happen in the world around them when they can open themselves up to different perspectives, when they can experience and practice empathy, when they can bring in the different realms of communication and be able to come together and think through a challenge and think through the challenging conversation that leads to a solution and engage in that and stay sustainably engaged in that until you reach a solution. I think it's something that a lot of adults really struggle to do. And if young people can really have the skills to do that, which is really a combination of skills. So I threw a bunch of skills into that last one.
Yeah, I know. But it's interesting you said collaborative problem solving because a lot of life skills frameworks, when you read literature, talks about problem solving. That's a typical, but you sort of clubbed collaboration and problem solving. Is there any particular reason that you've sort of put it together, collaborative problem solving?
Yeah, we've really been thinking a lot about how does social emotional learning work as a lever for equity? How do we create spaces of justice and how do we create opportunities for young people to be justice oriented and civically engaged? And SEL oftentimes can be taught in a way where we're only thinking about the student as themselves. And we only want them we talk about skills that they should have to be able to work through whatever in their own situation. But more and more, we're beginning to realize if we're really talking about equity and if we're really talking about creating a different reality in our society, we cannot think about social emotional learning as just one person. We have to think about how do we do this work together? Exactly. So that's a big focus of why collaborative is part of that.
And you mentioned curiosity and curiosity. I was just wondering, are there sort of overlaps with, critical thinking? Because the ability to question, the ability to sort of stay interested and enthusiastic and so on, I suppose could be linked to curiosity. So, but you didn't mention critical thinking, you mentioned curiosity. So I was just curious.
Yeah. I think this is the hope of mentioning some of these skills. These are really like buckets of skills,
Sure.
When you become curious, you're willing to investigate, you're willing to think critically, you're willing to ask questions. And I think all of that is part of kind of that critical thinking that we want young people to have. But that's not sustainable if you're not curious. It's not sustainable if you're not wanting to learn more, so it's not enough to say, we want you to have critical thinking skills, but we have to be able to identify how do we link that to something that young people are actually interested in, and how do we help to foster that sustained connection to the task until they actually land on something that might even resemble a solution. And sometimes we don't do that as well. We only focus on critical thinking, and there isn't enough there to sustain young people.
Yeah, I think it's a good point you've made. Yeah, that's right. I know my fourth question was connected with India, which is not fair to ask you, but I want you to look at it more broadly and particularly with the perspective of USA. Do you think there are specific skills that children need today? You've mentioned many of these skills. Are they the same skills, or do you think there are certain other skills that are particularly required for young people today?
Yeah, I really think that what the skills I mentioned are the ones that are probably going to be the most important. We just live in such a divisive society, and I think there are elements at play to try to ensure that we stay that way. But if we can engage differently, if we can ask different questions, if we can begin to think about individuals as people and not commodity, if we can humanize, the experiences that we're having, then we can begin to we'll be open to asking questions. We'll be open to hearing the stories of other people and seeing that just because they're different doesn't mean that it's bad, So I think this idea of how do I create this sense of belonging for myself? How do I act when I see that something is being done either to myself that is not right or to others that is not right? Do I have the sense of agency to speak up, to choose differently? I think all of this, when I went to school, I felt like I was passively going through school. I didn't feel the sense of agency. I didn't feel even identity. I'm a Haitian American. Both my parents are from.
Oh, you're from Haiti.
Yes.
Okay.
Both of my parents are from Haiti. And for a long time, I was not proud of that, I just wanted to be, because I felt different, and I didn't feel like my difference brought anything special to the classes that I was in. But I think if we can begin to break that down and really help young people understand that what they bring is absolutely critical to the well-being of this community that they're in, and their willingness to fight for this community to be well is absolutely essential. So I think these are some of the skills that we have to be able to teach our young people right here now.
Yeah. The other day we were talking to another specialist, child psychiatrist, as part of one of our interviews here from a national, it's a very, sort of premier institute here. And he was saying how the whole life skills, sort of idea has been sort of usurped by the corporate people to look at employability and employment and entrepreneurship and so on. So what do you feel about this employability skills, life skills vis-a-vis employment and entrepreneurship?
So I think I can see why the child psychologist would say that, for sure. I think every industry will try to take what it can and use it so that it's helpful to where they are. I do think it does, the idea of not just employability, but I think the idea of entrepreneurship is something that should probably be fostered more so than it is. We talk a lot about workforce skills. We talk a lot about workforce readiness. We talk a lot about how do you have the skills to get the job that allows you to be a contributor to your society. And I think what people are realizing, and even myself, I have a 15-year-old who I am trying to teach him even now. He's getting it, that being an employee of someone, there is a level of freedom that you just don't have. So I think there's the idea of entrepreneurship and being able to use your mind to create and being able to connect with other people to create. I think you have to be, if you're going to teach employability, then you have to teach entrepreneurship at the same time. And I think both of those are critically important for individuals to feel like they have the opportunity to select which one do I really want to dive into, so that I can be at my highest level of contribution. So all of these skills are necessary. I mean, you have to make money. You have to be able to contribute to what's happening, and you have to be able to take care of yourself and your own. But young people should have the opportunity on how they do that. And I think in our country specifically, and I think probably in a lot of countries, it has been taught that if you learn these skills, you'll be able to be the perfect employee, you'll get the job, but that doesn't always lead to people feeling like they're thriving in the societies that they're in. So really being able to expand that out is critical.
Is there anything different between employability? I know you said they sort of overlap. Is there anything different from in the skills that you need for entrepreneurship vis-a-vis employment?
That's a good question. I think so. I'm going to say when you are an employee, there's a lot of directive that you have to be able to take. There's a lot of creativity is not as high. For the most part, there is a passivity that you can engage in because someone else is thinking about, how do I ensure that all of these individuals are paid? How do I ensure that, but with that, there's a sense of freedom that you don't have as well. When you are thinking about being an entrepreneur, you have to think more critically about many, many other things, so you have to be able to network. You have to be able to have different types of conversations with folks. You have to be able to sell yourself, not in a terrible way, but you have to be able to let people know what you're contributing. So it does require a deeper sense of self, because you're doing all the thinking, as opposed to other folks being able to have to do those thinking for you. You don't have a human resources, department. You don't have, risk management. You're doing all of it. So it requires that you see yourself differently to engage in the work of entrepreneurship.
The rest of you, is there any question you'd like to ask at this point? I'm just going to pause, just in case something else has come up. Akhila, Swapnil.
Not at this point.
All right. Okay. All right.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So, do you think it would be valid to make a statement like entrepreneurship is a strong tool to foster SEL?
Say that one more time.
Would it be valid to make a statement entrepreneurship is a strong tool to foster SEL? Because as an entrepreneur, I'm practically, I would say it's more like I am teaching myself all the different competencies that we speak about.
Yeah, I am trying. That's a great question. And I'm wondering if I would flip that and say that by focusing more explicitly on SEL, that we can support young people to develop the skills to be entrepreneurs. You can get into the entrepreneurial space and absolutely fail because you just haven't, you just don't have those skills.
Exactly.
So I'd probably flip that.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the next question I have is about mental health, and I think particularly now with regard, our newspapers, our media are increasingly talking about how, and I think it must be the same case with US with the pandemic hitting young people so badly. What do you think? What are your views about the increasing, incidence of mental health problems amongst young people? And how what life skills are required to be able to cope with it? Perhaps you've answered it in the earlier questions, but I just want you to think about this from the lens of mental health.
Hmm. I really like this question, and I think it's important for us to recognize that we're not going to get out of situations that are as grave as we're seeing with just life skills. I think we have societal challenges, we have contextual challenges that adults for many generations have created. And I think those also need attention. So there are systemic issues that need to be addressed, for sure. I know in our society, there are systemic issues that need to be addressed. And something that we say often is that social emotional learning can't become the work of a young person. It cannot become us teaching young people all these skills to deal with the terrible society that we've created and continue to create for them. Yeah. And so, yes, I do think that having these skills, being able to recognize that despite how society sees me, I see myself differently. And feeling like that I have agency and I can help change the trajectory of my life brings about a sense of hope. Whereas if you didn't have it, there would be a sense of hopelessness and victimization that can lead to depression and all of these other mental health challenges. But I don't think it's sufficient for us to think that if we just do this work, that it's enough. For some, it'll be enough. They may not go down the path of mental health challenges. Because they have maybe different structures and systems around them that can support them. But I think we have to do both the work. So yes, absolutely. If for anyone to have any chance of getting through this life, well, we have to be able to think about, life skills. We have to think through, social emotional learning. And I think of them as the same. And having those skills increases the likelihood that you can navigate some of the most disruptive challenges that you face as an individual, because we'll all face them. I will say for myself, being able to having a level of self-awareness, knowing what I need when I'm in a space of challenge has carried me through so much, and knowing who I need to connect to, what is my community, how do I belong to this community, all of these different areas that we've been talking about, that has helped me navigate through some of the most difficult challenges that I've faced as an individual. And I think for young people, if they don't have those, it's really difficult for them to navigate through the challenges. So absolutely, the work is important, that we help them develop that net of skills that they can land on when they actually face those challenges. Yeah. I just want to make it very clear that the context is important. The system work has to happen as well.
Sure. Yeah. Also, when we talk about life skills, they talk about citizenship and civic education and social engagement of the youth with the community and so on. Is that important? What are your views about that? This whole idea of life skills being part, citizenship being part of life skills and social engagement and so on.
I think it's critical. We all have something we can contribute. And I think if we don't create the space for young people to begin to think about how can I contribute to our collective well-being, it's very possible they won't think about it at all. Yeah. They'll get through education and only think about how do I create for myself and for my own. Yeah. And I think we have done that in the past. And, students have gone through K through 12 and even through college. And we have folks who just think about how do I create opportunities for myself and for my own, and will walk through over anyone to get there, Yeah. But when you think about how do I create for myself, my own, my community, my society, you walk through life differently. And that's the difference that we need in society today. I don't know that we've ever had, the luxury. We've taken it. We've ever had the luxury to kind of talk about just me, myself, and I, but I think it's becoming critically evident that if we are not thinking at least about the collective humanity and the collective well-being, and we continue to perpetuate some of the challenges that we're facing right now.
Yeah. This is my last set of, written questions, because, and then maybe there may be a couple more from our team here. One is, perhaps USA is also not inclusive, but India is perhaps a far more sort of divided, discriminatory society than even a country like US. You talked about race. For us, it could be gender, caste, particularly. Sometimes race also, because we have people who come from tribal communities who are always seen as the others. They're not necessarily part of mainstream India or Indians and so on. So there is an imperative when we're looking at life skills to look at creating a more equitable, inclusive societies. So I'd like you to touch upon your own thoughts about how can one do that, because you've done work in the US, and US is constantly grappling with race. And I think this similar struggle is there amongst people. And a lot of times, in our case, a lot of our educators and teachers particularly are not necessarily aware or alert to the fact that caste is such a divisive issue in India. I mean,
religion, Maya. Sorry.
And sorry, religion also. I'm sorry, religion and caste. When I grew up, because technically in our constitution, caste has been abolished, because caste was from 18th and 19th century, certainly not 20th or now 21st century. But increasingly, as I've grown older, I realize caste is such a big issue, in the same way as perhaps caste and religion. Increasingly in our current situation, political situation, religion has also become a big issue. So I want you to talk about, because I'm sure you have thought about it from the race angle in America. So I'd love to hear your reflections.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned as far as like the gender piece and class, I know from, and I don't know India as well, for sure, as you do, as you live in it. I know what I've heard about just caste and class, and that ours is not as defined. I think ours is very subliminal, but the systems are there. One of the things is there's a YouTube clip by an author, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and she talks about the danger of a single story. And I think one of the ways to begin to break down these walls of exclusion is by helping young people to learn more of the story. We only know what we know, and we draw all of our opinions, our ideas, our conclusions from what we know. And until we start to know something different, we're going to continue to draw the same conclusions, the same ideas, the same perceptions about the folks around us. And so I think this idea of perspective taking is critical. That's part of social awareness. This idea of listening to the stories around you. And if you don't have folks that are different around you, what are the books that we can bring in? What are the videos that we can watch? There's so much content out there that allows you to broaden your perspective. And I think we have to begin to do that with young people. We cannot continue to have young people think that it's us and them, that there's this othering that continues to happen. But how can we create this sense of collective humanity? And it's by allowing each other to see others as human, like we still think, we still breathe, we still love, we still want acceptance, like everything that you want for yourself and your family, that person wants for themselves and their families. And so I think that's one of the biggest things is how do we create space for us to learn about one another, to take perspective, to show empathy, to put ourselves in someone else's shoes and really begin to understand the lives that they live. And then how do we draw different conclusions from that? And from there, how do we act agentically? now that we know, and now that we understand, and now that we see you as human, what can be different about the way that we go about life than how we've been taught or what we've seen in the past? So listening more, communicating more, asking more questions. It's back to all of those skills that we talked
I know.
about before. Being
Yeah.
curious,
Yeah,
this
exactly.
world is so much bigger.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes adults we come with our own, we already have our box. Young people come in and sometimes they don't have the box, and we insist that we put them in this small box. That makes sense to us, but if we as adults can step outside of ourselves and do this work ourselves, then there's more of an opportunity that we can create a more inclusive youth force, I should say, through our education systems.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I like what you said, that we think only what we know, and because we know a sort of a limited context, we seem to think that is the reality, when the reality is much, much more. And it's about expanding our perspective and horizons.
Yeah, I heard this story, and this is always so funny to me, but I heard this story. There's a lady who, every time she would make like pot roast, she would cut off the ends and put it in the pan. And her daughter asked her one day, like, why do you cut off the ends every time you make the pot roast? And she was just like, I don't know, my mom always did it. And so she went to her mom, and her mom said, I don't know, my mom always did it, And so the mom went to the grandmother, and she said, well, why do you cut off the ends? And she said, because my pan was too small. So it's just like, you've been cutting all this pot roast off and wasting it, but that is the only thing that you knew until you started asking questions, and I think that's where we get stuck, is that we just keep doing and we don't ask enough questions for us to do differently. So, yeah.
I think that's a great example.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Akila, Swapnil, Roshna?
Yes, I do have a question, Bloodine. At the beginning, when you were talking about what life skills are most important, you placed a lot of emphasis on the self, right? And then you spoke of identity and so on. So I was just wondering, in fact, we've been having this discussion internally about a broad classification of life skills, which would be one set would be anchoring internally, okay, and a set of life skills which would help us navigate externally. So I was just wondering, what do you think about it? What are your thoughts on this broad classification? Can we see it that way?
Oh yeah, I can see that. I can see that easily. And I think even the bucket of skills that I presented aligns with kind of we call them our social emotional competencies. Yes. And some of them are internal facing, some of them are external facing. So I would say the identity and the agency is more internal. The belonging and the collaborative problem solving is more the external, and the curiosity really weaves in between all of it.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's the way that you're looking at it, internal, external, like it all fits and it makes sense. And it aligns with this idea of civic engagement. Like if we're talking about being civically engaged, then you have to be able to take the internal understanding and be able to project that out in some way to be able to affect change.
Yeah.
Sure.
So does it also mean that all whatever life skill that could be seen as external have a strong element of the internal?
Yes.
Right?
Yes, absolutely. Because think about it, I would say, and we were just talking about this in the meeting yesterday, when we talk about the social emotional competencies, they are interrelated. You never drop self-awareness and stop doing that work to do the work with other people. You bring yourself wherever you go. So even as you're collaborating with other people, you're internally aware of the dialogue that's happening within, and you're constantly connecting back to, you're reflecting, you're thinking, and how do I respond? And so it's all there. It's all there. You bring it, it's kind of this collaborative process of constant, you know, internal reflection and then external projection in some way.
I think that's a nice way of looking at it too. Yeah. Yeah. Any other question? I don't want to
Thank
keep-
you, Bloodine. Thank you for that.
No problem. Great question.
Yeah. Any other question? No? All right. So shall we close it then, everybody? Bloodine has been very, very generous with her time. She's got a day of work ahead.
Oh, no problem. This has been like,
Thank
I
you
have
so
loved
much.
starting the day like this with all
Thank
of you. And
Thank
I really
you,
do
Bloodine.
hope. No
I
problem.
hope we can
all of
stay
you-
in touch. I would love to stay in
Absolutely.
touch because
Absolutely.
Castle's work has informed our work so much with iSelf. Our own,
Yeah.
we use the Castle framework, but we've created the age bands based on Indian children and Indian children's developmental stages.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yes, I would love to hear how this all pans out, what comes
Will
of it,
do,
for
definitely.
sure. And Roger
Yes.
sends his hello, Maya.
Oh,
I told him he
good.
said hi, so he
Yeah.
sends his hello to you as well. So
Great. Thank
Sure.
you.
no
You
problem.
take care. Yeah.
You too. And I hope all of you and your family are fine with, you know, just the pandemic and
So
everything.
far we
sending much
are.
love.
Yeah.
So
Good.
far we are, but I know a lot of our colleagues have been affected, but
Yeah,
you stay safe, take care.
you too.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you,
Take
Bloodine.
care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're
Take
welcome.
care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.